Nichiren Buddhism is a Buddhist sect focused in Japan. It is based on the teachings of Nichiren, its founder. Nichiren is considered a great writer and thinker of his time by many, even outside of Buddhism, and the founding of this sect of Buddhism is only one of the results of this. The formation of the Nichiren sect was during a time of much turmoil in Japan, and the religion took a long time to take hold. Nichiren was ignored for years, exiled, and in many ways degraded. Yet he continued with his writings, teachings, and exploration of Buddhism. After all of this, people finally began to believe him, and in him, and his form of Buddhism began to spread. The many schools of Nichiren Buddhism are an important part of Japanese history, and show the intense power of the teaching of the Buddha. Understanding the past of the man, Nichiren, is important to understanding his views, and thus many of the stances of his sect. The sect takes its name from the man, who was a monk, born in 1222. He was born to a family with little respect, mostly because his father was merely a fisherman, a person who killed animals for a living. This put them at the bottom of a social class ladder. His birth name was Nichimaru, and he joined the priesthood at the age of 12, at a temple called Seichoji. After his ordination at age 16, he began his search for the one true sect of Buddhism. He changed his name to Zeisho Borencho, and he went to Kamakura, where he studied until 1253, when he had a revelation. He then went back to the temple in order to begin his teachings. He decided, in part through this revelation, that there could only be one true sect of Buddhism, one true religion of the Buddha, and not the many that existed at the time. The true Buddhism, he believed, would follow the supreme Lotus Sutra. He believed this was correct for the people of Japan, especially at that particular time in history. He cited the reasons for natural disaster, war, and other hardships falling upon the country as the fact that the people were following the incorrect forms of Buddhism. If the correct sect, following the Lotus Sutra, were to become the official religion of Japan and be widely practiced, he believed that the country would be saved from turmoil and become greater. Once his revelations had fallen into place, he took the name Nichiren. He is believed to have said, "I am Nichiren, the votary of the Lotus Sutra." The name itself combines the kanji character for sun and the character for lotus. Nichiren would suffer for his teachings of the Lotus Sutra. He was far from easily accepted. First, he petitioned the Japanese government to make his form of Buddhism the only right form, to be practiced by all citizens. He believed that the recent string of earthquakes, such as the one in Kamakura in 1257, landslides, and storms were because the untrue forms of Buddhism were being practiced during the time of Mappo. Mappo is the last of 3 eras of gradual decline in Buddhism. The Buddha had predicted Mappo and said that it would begin 2001 years after his death. In order to place this in the time of Nichiren, there needs to be agreement on the date of Buddha's death. Nichiren agreed with the Chinese reckoning that places the Buddha's death in 947 BC. This is quite important to the acceptance of Nichiren's teachings, as well as his understanding of his revelations. This is in part because it was said that the true Buddha was destined to appear in the age of Mappo to save mankind. It is the tenet of Nichiren Shoshu that Nichiren was that savior. Believing in this Chinese placement of the Buddha's death in 947 BC places Nichiren perfectly in this time, making him far more easily accepted as a savior. So, Nichiren's petition to the government, in combination with his predictions that civil war and invasion would come if the incorrect sect of Buddhism was being practiced, led to his exile. It is said that on the day that the men came, Nichiren was to be killed, but the people sent to capture and kill him supposedly saw a white light and dropped their swords. They would not assassinate him. Instead, Nichiren was sent to Sato to live in exile. For people that believe Nichiren's teaching, this is a turning point. The miracle white light that saved Nichiren's life makes him seen even more as a true leader, and also the true Buddha. There was an intervention that saved his life, and this must have occurred for a reason. This turning point is referred to as Hoshaku Kempo, or discarding the provisional and revealing the true. During his exile, Nichiren wrote on the opening of the eyes, and the object of devotion for observing the mind in the 500-year period, as well as gozon, He believed that the person who teaches the way of the Lotus Sutra is meant to suffer, as it is mentioned in the sutra itself. At the point of his exile, he was indeed suffering. He was separated from his disciples. He took this as a sign that he was on the correct path. When Nichiren returned from exile, he went to Minobu, where he started his temple and taught until his death. He died in 1281 and was given the names Nichiren Shonin and Nichiren Daishonin out of respect. Also important to understanding the Nichiren sect of Buddhism is to understand the doctrine on which it was started and on which it stands. Perhaps most notable is that while most forms of Buddhism do not have a text of their own, Nichiren Buddhism does. It is the Lotus Sutra. This sutra is the main guidance for Nichiren Buddhism and stands above all other writings. The sutra itself is a compilation of the work of many over many years. It is Mahayana and is called the Lotus Sutra because the Sanskrit name is Siddharma Pundarika Sutra, meaning Lotus Right Law Sutra, or the right law which is like the white lotus. This can be broken down farther into Sat or Sad, which is a prefix meaning to exist, Dharma, as in law or teaching, and Pundarika, meaning white lotus. The importance of the white lotus is as an important Buddhist symbol of purity and spiritual merit. It is used extensively as a symbolic ornament in Buddhist architecture. The particularly important version of this sutra to Nichiren is the Chinese translation from Kumarajiva. In Japan, it is commonly known as Hokkekyo. This is the specific translation which stands as the canon for Nichiren Buddhism. In terms of doctrine, the writings of Nichiren himself are also very important. They are known in conjunction as Go-Ibun. One of particular importance is on establishing the correct teachings for the peace of the land. This expounds on his idea that only the Lotus Sutra is the right way, and no other sects of Buddhism are correct. Nichiren also wrote a famous 4-part maxim. This maxim says that first, those who believe in Nembutsu sects, according to which salvation lies in reciting the name of the Bodhisattva Amitabha, will go to Visi, the inferno of continuous punishment. Then he stated, those who believe in Zen are devils. The believers in Shinyon sect will ruin the nation. And finally, the believers in the Ritsu sect are traitors. All in all, this maxim gives the definitive statements that not only are all other sects incorrect, but those who practice them are going down the wrong path, the path to ruin. Nichiren then went on to show that his form of Buddhism was superior through the Gokko, or 5 principles. The first of these is Kyo, or Kennen. The Kennen of Nichiren is the Lotus Sutra. The second is Ki, or the readiness of the people to accept the Kennen. Nichiren believed that the people at that time were ready to accept the Lotus Sutra. Ji, or time, was right, he said, because the Mappo era had begun. Next was Koku, or country. Nichiren felt that it was specifically his homeland of Japan that was ready for the Lotus Sutra, and was in need of it. This was especially because they were experiencing Mappo through war and natural disaster. Finally, Kyoho Rufo no Sengo, or the sequence in which religious teaching may be spread. In Japan, it was time for the Lotus Sutra, and only the Lotus Sutra. Now that the reasons to follow the Lotus Sutra had been spelled out, the concept of Ichinen Sanzen, or one thought 3,000, could be understood and taken in. This says, the human mind at any one moment incorporates the universe in 3,000 aspects. The number 3,000 comes from the 10 conditions of the human mind, which contain 10 conditions each, and the 10 aspects of human life, times the 3 categories of human life. All is one in this thought, and all connected, and contained within the mind, and yet large and seemingly insurmountable. This is an idea easily accepted by the masses, and comforting in many ways. Nichiren had proof, or so it was called, of the truth of his other writings. This was called the Shanso, or the 3 proofs. Nichiren said that the righteousness of the true Buddhism could be shown through proof by logic, proof by written language, and proof by reality. The logic of Nichiren Buddhism is that it possesses what Nichiren saw as a kind of universal validity. The proof by written language is that the value of the religion is based on the value of its documents. According to Nichiren, the Lotus Sutra is supreme. This already being a Buddhist sutra, its importance was not completely deniable, and Nichiren held it high. The proof by reality is if people who are committed to it are happy. Nichiren truly believed that the people of Japan would be saved by the Lotus Sutra, and in following it would find a better, happier life. Nichiren Buddhism being made the official religion of Japan, he felt, would bring an end to the time of Mappo, and thus the problems of natural disaster, war, famine, and disease. Now that the fundamentals of Nichiren's